So next up, I'm very excited to introduce another one of SAMA's training partners, excellent partners, and someone who has a true gift of communicating difficult ideas in a simple and memorable way. His company specializes in using a proven value-led mindset to challenge how many of our SAMs are doing their job today. So with us to talk about how you can become personally relevant, please welcome Phil Styrlund from the Summit Group. Thank you. Thanks.
Good morning. So Adrian, should we tell him now that we colluded? Should we? One of the greatest joys of this talk was preparing for it and getting to know that man. Not only is he a brilliant man, he is a good man. Thank you, my friend, for that message. We're going to pick up right where he left off. What I'd like to share with you this morning is the hero's journey, but I want to open up with a thesis. And the thesis is, on the hero's journey, it's not about us. Until we understand that life is not about us, it'll never make sense. And where I want to go is, as we are on the journey, our goal is to impact people, to impact others. And how do we do that? By being relevant. So Simon Sinek has made popular the notion of start with the why. So I want to talk about why is relevance matter. We're going to talk about what I call the patterns of relevance. As we looked at this concept, what were the patterns of, we'll call it highly impactful people, like Adrian? What were they doing differently? And third, along the way, I'll share with you some insights that we learned about what distinguishes highly impactful people. So let me begin with the why. Here's my why. My hero. My dad. He was my superhero. He was my rock. He was the greatest father you could ever have. Passed away 15 years ago at the age of 89. He was in love and married to my mom for 60 years. He worked for AT&T for 38 years. He was second wave on Normandy Beach. Ladies and gentlemen, they do not make him like that anymore. But yet where this story begins is in an interesting place. A few years before he passed away, I think I was over at his house, I think we were watching a Vikings game. And he was grumpy, but it wasn't about the Vikings. And he said to me, I'm not afraid of dying, but I hate to not matter anymore. Think about that. And I drove home after I think the Vikings lost again. And that haunted me. Here a man at the end of his extraordinarily significant life had a fear as much of not mattering as not dying. I could not let go of that thought. And that's where this begins. And so I ask you this. What I want to do today is, we've fed your head enough this week. Would you agree? Welcome to the tsunami of stimulation. What I want to do this morning is speak to your soul. And I mean that in all sincerity. And people ask me, well, do I have a soul? And my answer comes from C.S. Lewis. No, you are a soul. You have a body. The question that we ask then is, at the end of our life, just like my dad, how do we measure the impact of our life? What's the net promoter score of our life? I don't have the answer, but maybe let me give you a thought. That it might be what I call the dual bottom line of life. First, let's be very clear, money matters. Money will not buy you happiness, lack of money will buy unhappiness. As my dad always said, if you want to help the poor, don't become one. Number two, though, is what I believe is the most important bottom line of life. How many lives have we deeply impacted? And I'm not talking about quantity, I'm talking about depth of impact. So on our hero's journey that Adrian outlined so beautifully, at the end of the journey, have we deeply impacted someone else? And it might be one person, it might be two, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is called victory. So maybe that's the why. We can't impact people, though, if we can't influence people. So the thesis I bring to you this morning is simply this. If we want to live a dual bottom line life, relevance is the fuel. If we're not relevant, we can't influence people. If we can't influence people, we can't impact people. So what I'm going to share with you is not about us, but how you can matter more so you can matter to what? To others. So let's dive into it. I'm going to share with you 3 patterns of impact. And it begins with character. Without character, relevance is just a higher order of deception. Your moral ecology matters deeply. We've been talking about the role of AI in the machines. Well, never will we matter more, and I believe never more will our values value more. They will ultimately be our ultimate value. So I offer to you this paradigm, and it comes from a friend of mine, Dr. Fred Keel. Fred wrote a beautiful book called Return on Character. I'm going to summarize it in 2 minutes. What Fred found after 9 years of research is this. People who possessed what he called the core 4 character habits, 2 of the head, 2 of the heart. Now check this out. Produced between 70 to 20% higher financial returns. And he was highlighted in Harvard Business Review. So what he unearthed is this simple truth. Being a good person makes you financially great. And in today's new world, for those leaders in the room, great people want to work for good people. Rock stars don't want to work for narcissistic, self-absorbed jerks. There are 4 dynamics. Number 1 is integrity. I define it as do what you say you will do when you say you will do it. Number 2 is responsibility, but responsibility. Your ability to respond optimally to things we don't know about. As Adrian said, the future is full of permanent disruption. So how do we live a life of permanent pivoting? But then we get to the heart. Because the truth is now the soft stuff is the new hard stuff. And what Fred found, listen carefully, forgiveness was critical. Number 1, forgiveness of others. Resentment is the most toxic physical emotion there is. It is tied to more physical disease than any other emotion. Number 2, forgiveness of self. Forgiving our past. Because regret is the second most toxic. And finally, compassion. Ironically, of the 4, Fred found that compassion produced the highest financial returns. Why? Because when you treat another person as a real human, you unlock what he called the third. He said people basically bring 2/3 of their energy to work. But when you treat them as a real human, you're unlocking that third. The soft stuff is now the hard stuff. Without character, we cannot have relevance. All week we've been talking about what are the new competencies in this world of the converging technologies? How do we need to show up? Well, let me make it very simple. People always ask me, so what does the Summit Group do? And I said, we create business people. And we're also a recovery group for sales training. Because ironically, what sales training has been training for the last 20 years is diametrically opposite of what customers seek. It's mind-bending. We have built an industry on exactly what customers don't want. We built an industry on persuasion, messaging, pitching. What customers want is listening, analyzing, guiding, and being real, not being some sort of human brochure. So I believe that the core four new, shall we call them acumens, are these. And we've been talking about them all week. I don't know, is Jennifer Gardner in the room? I don't know if she is, but Jennifer spoke at our conference in Amsterdam. What a beautiful explainer of AI and what it means. And in net, she said, about 50 to 60% will be taken over by the machines, the low value stuff. But here's the good news. It frees us up to what? For the high value stuff, which is that. But let me make it even simpler. For all of us in the room, I believe, in the middle of these competencies, there lies three things that matter deeply. Number one, you must be the subject matter expert of your customer's business model. You need to be the Michael Porter of your customer. There should be nobody in your company that knows your customer's business model better than you. Number two, your role as a SAM is very simple. Here's SAM in one sentence, aligning the capabilities of your company to the priorities of your customer. Don't make it any more complicated. You're the human docking station. But third, and don't get caught in this trap because you can get overwhelmed by saying, I have to be the expert in everything. No, you don't. What you do need to be is the expert in your experts. Once you understand what your customer is dealing with, instead of saying, how do I solve it, the first question is, who in my company do I bring in? What experts do I align? Do you see the difference there? Because let me tell you, if you try to be the expert, it's not going to go well. I also do believe how, though, in the middle of this, there's a new mental muscle to be developed. And I call it the new muscle of reductionism. When we speak with customers everywhere, it's simple. Anybody, any company that brings simplicities to our complexities gets our attention, period. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. It's making things simple, but not simplistic. It's easy to dummy things down. It is profoundly difficult to create clarity on the other side of complexity. That, my friends, is a gift. But it's a muscle that I want you to build, is to be the great reductionist, because it will distinguish you in ways that are unimaginable. Where I want to spend, though, as I speak to your soul, is really this. Because remember the second bottom line of life? How do we impact others? Well, first of all, let me tell you, I don't know. But on our journey, I've identified that there seems to be four dynamics. But let me be very clear. I'm not up here standing to you as someone who's got it figured out. I'm not standing up here like with a form of mastery. In fact, it's just the opposite. If I leave you with anything today, it's because of my fears, my failures, and my flaws. Don't mistake that I've figured it out. I haven't. But let's get confused together. Authenticity. I define it simply as this: true to self, real to others. As someone once said, Be yourself. Everyone else is taken. As we dealt into people who were deeply authentic, we found an enigma. Adversity was the accelerator of authenticity. What? Yeah. Let me frame it like this. I believe that when God wants our attention, He throws us a pebble. If that doesn't work, we often get thrown a stone. And especially for us men, generally that doesn't work, and we often get a brick. Ladies, would you agree with that? Now that we have a male recovery group formed, we can move on. But here's the truth. When we found profoundly authentic, wise human beings, we found that they had been deeply broken. But the brokenness, the bricks, created the wisdom. But it's how they responded to the bricks. And bricks come in many flavors. Sometimes bricks can be health, marriage, kids, financial, business. There's a lot of bricks out there, aren't there? And it's not if they're coming, they are coming. But what I know for sure after this journey is this: they are there not to hurt us, but to improve us. But it's how we respond to the bricks that define the journey. Because pain without action, pain just softens you, it corrodes you. But pain with response, first it scars you, but then it grows you. So in the book, I call it the Great Humbling. The Great Humbling. It's those moments when not only are you broken, but you don't even know why you're broken. Thomas Merton, the great theologian, said, "Wisdom is to not squander the benefits of your burden." Isn't that a beautiful phrase? Do not squander the benefits of your burdens, because they are there as blessings in disguise. Mastery. Don't look to me, I look to others. But what we found are two dynamics. Number one, people who deeply understood their swim lane of life, first of all, had a deep understanding of what we call their signature strengths. Call it your hardwired giftedness. Let me define it simply. A signature strength, number one, is something that comes naturally to you. But here's the second part, most important. It's something you love to do. Because sometimes we can be good at things, but it doesn't mean we like doing them. And here's Phil's rule. You can't fake anything after the age of 40. Agreed? You are obligated to understand your wiring so you can be impactful in the second half of life, because the joy of aging is we don't have energy to fake it anymore. Jim, would you agree? Isn't it beautiful to get old? And secondly, wisdom. People chose wisdom over intelligence, and ultimately, I believe that is what will distinguish us from the bots. Bots can create intelligence, but only we can create wisdom, because wisdom is the stuff of the soul. And we also found people who did not try to solve world hunger. They focused as much possible energy on the fewest possible things in their life. So let's unpack wisdom, because once again, it's such a rare thing in this world, isn't it? Unfortunately, as we say at the Summit Group, common sense isn't common anymore. As we looked at profoundly wise people, we found that it flowed from three rivers. First is reflection. People who think about their thinking, who reflect on that day, that week. What's happened to me? What can I learn? Our challenge now is that we've become activity addicts. We're texting, we're emailing, we're not thinking. We've lost the ability to reflect, and you can't get wise if you don't think backwards and say, what have I learned from today? Number two is they surround themselves with nutritious relationships. I'm going to give you a tool for this in just a moment. And third, they read important things. Because reading the big stuff, brings us the wisdom of the past. It's not on Instagram, it's not on Twitter. It's in the big books of life. You can capture literally centuries of wisdom, but you need to read the big stuff. What was interesting is two things about wise people. Number one, they had what I called a sane view of themselves. What do I mean by that? They had high aspirations, but they had low expectations, because life doesn't owe us anything, but they had realistic sense of their limitations. Because here's the headlines: we can't do everything. I know people who live a life of what I call all thrust, but no vector. And finally, as I said, they've been through tough things. Mark Twain once said, good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. Here's your tool. I cannot overstate this. Never has it been more important to surround yourself with fewer, deeper, and more nutritious human relationships. The challenge of social media is we can be over-connected and under-related. A Facebook friend is not a relationship. The first half of our life is about time management. The second half of our life is about energy management, and let me give you a 90-second tool. I believe in our life there seems to be four flavors of relationships. First are additives. These are people that, for reasons you cannot explain, are human caffeine. They're spiritual caffeine. When you're with them, you simply feel better. When I speak to Adrian, I come away feeling better. He is a human additive. But there's also people in our lives, now let me be clear, I'm not talking about good or bad. They may be wonderful human beings, but for reasons we cannot explain, they suck the energy out of you. They're vampires. They are relational sandpaper, but they are wonderful people. Set them free. Because a depleter per you could be someone else's additive. Third are dividers, the most toxic of all, because they show up as a friend, but it's really a transaction disguised as a relationship. And finally are the multipliers, people who open up your perspective, your point of view, your mindset, and they make your life larger by opening up your point of view. So my point is simple. This is not a tool for judgment and narcissism. In fact, it's just the opposite. But the thesis I bring to you is very simple. If you and I are living too much of our relational energy in the lower right, then we've got no energy to be an additive for someone else. Agreed? Fewer, deeper, nutritious. Embedded in this tool, though, is another tool. I could not coach you more passionately to, in your life, create a personal board of directors. It requires no meetings, no WebExes, no conference calls, no minutes. But find 3 or 4 people in your life that when you're going through difficult things, the great humblings, or you're making difficult decisions, that you can lean on and lean to. Many of them are in the room today. Friends of mine that go back literally so far I cannot remember Dan Kosh when we first were friends. But when I am going through hard things, I go to Dan Kosh because he's a brother. And Dan knows me better than I know me. Dan, we've been through some fun discussions. But the point is this. When we go through hard things, we lose perspective, and we need other people to bring us the perspective. And here's the criteria for your board of directors. Number 1, people who will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Are you with me? And secondly, I look for people who have been through hard things. Because when I want counsel, I don't want some beer drinking, backslapping happy talker. I want somebody who's been broken, who's learned, and is giving me wisdom. I travel in Africa a great deal and saw this symbol on trees, walls, stones. It's the African symbol for wisdom called the Sankofa. And what it means is, in life, it's a bird that's flying forward in life, but its head is looking backwards. And it's the African form of saying, san is to return, ko is go, fa is seek. Fly forward in life, but constantly be looking backwards to say, what can I learn from the past? And I'll give you a quick tool. As you fly home in the airplane this afternoon or this evening, have a nice glass of Chardonnay or Cabernet. Take out the napkin and draw a line. That line is your life. And try to remember as you look back on your life the 1 or 2 the greatest unspeakable joys that you can remember in your lifetime. Put those in the top of the line. Second, try to remember the 1 or 2 most deeply broken experiences you ever had, when you literally were broken, humbled, and on your knees. Put those beneath the line. Here's why. The joy is a validation of our gifts. The pain is a preparation for our future. Because as I said earlier, the bricks are there to prepare us, but to do what? To help other people. Because what we found is this. The way to impact other people is not to fix them, but to share your struggles. After 62 years on the planet, 8.9 million miles on Delta Airlines, and 81 countries, I found that there's only 2 people on the planet, only 2 cultures, people who are struggling and people who are faking like they're not struggling. Every one of us is struggling with something. The greatest gift that you can give others is to let them know that you are, because people's deepest fear is being alone. Get out of fixing, get in the business of sharing. Empathy. All I will say here is, again, it's not about you. And when you pour your life into others on that hero's journey, the joy that you get is immeasurable and unspeakable. But there is nothing in today's world or media that speaks to this. It is the opposite of the Kardashian factor, where the media says it's all about you. Empty yourself into others, the joy is unspeakable. And finally, action. But not just action, right action. A friend of mine is John Busacker. He owns a company called LifeWorks, and John likes to say, in our career, there's 3 flavors of work. First, there's hard work. We've all had those jobs that just didn't fit who we are. We've all had those, haven't we? That's called hard work. And when I say, when the job don't fit, quit. Number 2 is right work. It's not the perfect job, but it's perfect enough and it fits kind of who we are. And that's called reality. Do not sign up for the illusion of what I hear many people say. I'm going to go quit my job and follow my passion, because here's why. Often what you're passionate about doesn't pay well. So here's the truth of life. Sometimes we have to do enough right work so we can what? Afford our life work. And life work is what the great writer Dorothy Sayers said, is when you stop working to make a living, and now you're living to work. Comfort is one of the most overrated things. Leisure is one of the most overrated things. It produces anxiety, depression, and meaninglessness. Action creates motivation. Motivation does not create action. So there you go. Character, business relevance, personal relevance. It's not some sort of shrink-wrap plan for success. It's just what I've found so far on the road. And as I said earlier, I'm no genius. I've just made more mistakes than you have. All I did is put them on a slide. It's not a 12-step program. In fact, it's just the opposite. Maybe what it says is, the world's a mess. You and I are a mess. Everything's a mess. Figure out who you are. Figure out some people you can help. And I want to end again, because I started with my father, and I'll leave you with his Swedish wisdom. He told all of us a very simple rule for life: to be interested in others, not to be interesting. Be interested, not interesting. And I think that's kind of it, because here's what I found. When you're deeply, authentically, passionately interested in others, now you become more interesting to them. When you become interesting to them, then you can influence them. When you can influence them, you can impact them. And when you can impact others, you now have meaning. That second bottom line of life that money cannot